Is it working? Okay. That's good for those in the back. Well, good morning, everybody. It is still morning, and my name is John Bauters, and thank you so much for the very kind words, Nancy, in the introduction. I have lived here, and there are some snacks in the front. I have lived here in the Bay Area for just about 15 years now. I've always lived in the city of Emeryville since I came out here. I've been on the Emeryville City Council for the past 8 years, half that time serving as the city's mayor. But that's a part-time job, and in my full-time job, I've spent over 25 years in nonprofit services and in faith-based communities, working with people who are unhoused, people who live with chronic mental illness, and victims of crime who live with trauma. So my work began a long time ago, as Nancy mentioned. I came out as a young person in the 90s to my parents as gay. My parents, at that time, we lived in a very conservative religious community in the Midwest, very homogenous. My parents and my community were not very accepting of that. And that led to me being homeless as a young adult. So I actually moved, my first time moving to the West Coast was as a result of that. I lived in my car for a period of time. I couch surfed. I stayed in places with strangers. And I did things that were akin to survival behaviors to help myself just be here, present. And that kind of took me on a different trajectory from where I had planned to be. I had always wanted, going to high school, to do marine biology. I had wanted to explore the ocean and boats and science. But sometimes your life takes you in a place and in a direction that you don't anticipate, and you're exposed to real-world experiences and people that are different than what you had known before. And so my career began actually working in social and human services. My first job was through the AmeriCorps program. I got into the AmeriCorps program, and I was a disaster relief director for the Red Cross. I did a couple years doing that work, and I used that to get a scholarship, and I went back to school with that scholarship, and I got my degree. And I began working with people who were unhoused in Chicago. So I went back to the Midwest, and I was working with people in Chicago who were unhoused. I did street outreach, I did night ministry work, and I ultimately got employed by a couple different legal aid organizations. One of them is Cabrini Green Legal Aid, and I worked at the Cabrini Towers, one of the United States' largest and oldest failed social housing projects that really put a lot of people in dire poverty in a concentrated space and then essentially treated them as subhuman people for decades. Those towers are no longer there, and people have actually been moved into better housing opportunities across Chicago. But it was my experience in Chicago working with people who had been unhoused. As Nancy said, I don't often use the term homeless. There's nothing wrong with using that term. But what I always like to say is when we say the homeless, right? Homelessness is an experience. It's not a status. It's not like me being a man or being white. It's a status that it's an experience people can enter, and they can also exit it, right? It's something that's capable of happening both ways. And so we want to really think about people at the core as people. And I want to just thank Nancy and everybody here who participates in going out and doing the work you do to feed people. I know sometimes you wonder, is this making a difference? Am I doing the right things? Am I changing any lives? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes. There's so much of an absence right now in human compassion for people who are unhoused, and the importance of person-to-person contact. Really, even if you're not the social worker or the caregiver or the provider who is going to help a person on their mental health or housing journey, they need that human contact in order to be in a place to receive those services when they do come around to them. There's a lot of people today who can walk right by a person who's unhoused or walk right over them even on the streets of Oakland and San Francisco. And so it's really, really important to recognize that they have dignity, that they have value, that they had an experience in their life, maybe different from mine, but they had a different experience that put them there, and there are experiences that can bring them out of that. So I was invited to come and talk a little bit about, well, what can we do? What are we doing well? What could we do differently? And I thought to frame that conversation a little bit, I would begin by sharing what is the difference between what a city does and what our county does, right? So a lot of times it's like, well, who's supposed to be doing this work? And so cities typically, your city government is responsible largely for infrastructure. So they pave your roads, or in some places they don't. They pave your roads, they manage your sewer system, they build and approve housing, they take care of utilities, and public safeties. Public safety is kind of the core service. Some larger cities like Oakland do also provide homeless services. They do augment the services that are provided. But the county, which is the government agency that most of us don't pay much attention to, Alameda County has about 1.8 million people in it. And the county has a $4.1 billion, with a B, dollar budget. The vast majority of that budget is the social safety net services. It is the provider of mental health care. It is the provider of the Alameda Health System, the public hospital system. It provides foster care and child welfare services, the adult protective services, in-home supportive services for seniors, welfare to work like CalWorks programs for mothers or single parents who are on welfare but trying to provide for their children, women, infants, and children programs like WIC, federally funded programs like SNAP. All those bucket of funds are all exclusively provided for by the county. So the county is supposed to be the leader when it comes to delivering homeless services, and it's supposed to coordinate with cities. Cities can provide shelters, cities can provide physical spaces, but the county is supposed to work hand in glove with the city to provide services. Raise your hand if you think Alameda County has been doing a great job. Okay. Yeah, we haven't made a lot of progress, and one of the reasons, Nancy and I got introduced at a home event, and we had a chance to talk about this issue. One of the things that really we need more people who are engaged on this issue to understand is the need to change the way we're doing the things we're doing. So today, if we were out providing services to people, the county still uses models for how to deliver services that are 20 to 30 years old. Right, social models that don't really work. So we meet and we engage a person who's unhoused, and then we say, we're gonna provide you with case management, and then there's a person from a behavioral health organization assigned to manage your casework, and we identify your needs, right? You need long-term mental health care, you've endured serious trauma, you perhaps are still in the plight of addiction. There's a combination of things that a person might need, and in almost all those cases for that, it's also that the person is unhoused. Right? And so we have a couple of problems. One, cities aren't providing shelter space sufficient enough to bring people indoors. That's a major issue, right? That we need to bring people indoors. Because if a person is unhoused, and I'm out on the street unhoused, and my social worker, my case manager comes to meet with me regularly about my case plan, the efficacy of that plan is not very effective when I'm in this location. Because when you leave, I still live surrounded by all those externalities, all that chaos, the noise of living under a freeway overpass, the treatment I receive from other people, the lack of human hygiene facilities to access, right? If I'm struggling with addiction, 2 a.m, the dealer drives up. It is providing me access to that thing that is going to give me peace of mind and release from the stress and the pain and the mental anguish I experience by virtue of being in that situation. It becomes very hard to ask a person to overcome addiction when they're constantly exposed to the environment that allows that addiction to continue. And so in my professional journey, I ended up going to law school and becoming an attorney for people who are homeless in Chicago. And I've represented probably close to 2,500 people in my career, vast number of them being unhoused. And without fail, I can't think of a time when a person who I was providing legal services to successfully kicked an addiction while living on the street. It just does not happen, people. It is the needle in the haystack to find that person who's like, today I'm going to be clean and sober, and I'm going to get my life together while I'm living in this situation, and I'm addicted to something that is really harmful to me, and I cannot break my path with it. And so we need to stop managing poverty in place. That's what we're spending our money on. We are managing poverty in place. We are taking resources and we are providing human kindness and care, but we are not bringing people out of a space where they can actually benefit from the services we all pay for. We as taxpayers pay for those services for that person in need to get care, but the ability to actually work with help, succeed with care, overcome those things. I have worked with people who have kicked heroin addictions, meth addictions, fentanyl addictions, but that was interventions that moved those people into supportive services wrapped around a shelter or housing intervention that allowed them to be stable and away from those environments that made it more likely for them to relapse or continue to have problems. And give a couple examples of So the question is that, well, can we ever solve this problem? What do we need to do? Yes, we can. 100% we can. In fact, people do it all the time. San Diego had a project about 10 years ago, and I really wish they had continued with it, but as politics goes, different people become in charge of how the money gets spent, and other people have priorities different from ours. But they ran a project called Project 23. And the goal of the project was for the first 6 months to 12 months, the county, and we do this here too, the county tracks each user. So you enter the homeless services system, and we track and make sure that you're getting access to things. So we put you in the system, and then we're tracking how frequently you engage your mental health care. We track how frequently you're engaging food assistance, what programs in our coalition of services that you're using. Well, what they tracked was, how often do people go to the emergency room for an undiagnosed or untreated issue? Whether that's a mental health crisis, gangrene in their foot, bleeding from some place of their body, violently ill, right? They tracked, how often does this person get arrested or have contact with the police department? How often does this person get swept off of the street through a public works street sweeping program? And they identified, it ended up being 23 people, but they did the project for 25 in the end. They identified the 25 most expensive users of the county's services. The top 3 people all cost the county every year more than $800,000 alone. That was how much. There were people who were being arrested more than 60 times a year for crimes of poverty, vagrancy, nuisance. They're outside, they're going through a mental health crisis, they're yelling at the side of the building, someone in the building calls police, we don't know why this man is screaming at the sky outside. The police show up. That police is real money, real time spent away from dealing with burglaries, rapists, other things that we want them to protect the community against. It's spent dealing with a person whose actual need is a mental health need. It's not really a safety need at the bottom, it's a mental health need. The number of the highest users of the emergency room system were having over 100 visits to an emergency room. So what does that tell you though about someone's behavior? They actually want help. They're looking to get help, and they're coming in and they sometimes can't articulate what they need or why they're there, but they're actually there because they know this is a place I can get help. But what we're doing is we're putting that person in line at the public hospital or the emergency room, and that is taking time from, you come in now and you've been in a car accident and you need to be, but the doctors are already serving somebody else who's got some other type of ailment who we see maybe every 3 days on average, right? Yeah, and so we're literally, and so these are people who are we call them frequent flyers. They're so regularly in all of the services systems that they are taking up the resources that they need. They need the resources, but we're not giving it to them in a way that's efficacious. So we collectively, as a system and as a society, we spend so much time and money managing them in place, managing that. So Project 23 said, we've identified those top, in the end it was 25 or 6 people, we've identified those top consumers of public services, and we're going to literally just buy a building. We're going to put a team of social workers and mental health professionals in the building, and we're just going to move those 26 people inside and give them apartments, okay? They studied them for 3 years. They tracked them for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, there was an 86% reduction in numbers of police calls on them. There was a 65% reduction in emergency room visits. And they were averaging $3 million in savings from housing 26 people.
Which cost for how much?
The housing, I don't know the top of my head. I just know that the net result was just over, what's the cost? But in the end, the county is actually still saving $3 million with this intervention. And this is not rocket science. I know I had a chance to talk to Molly, we both worked in the same space. This is something that other communities do too. They make these interventions, they make these investments, and they say, okay, we have the information, we know who's the most in need. So right now the county says, well, we can't change anything about how we do services because we have to balance our budget. So we can't increase services to this group of people here. There has to be a change. We have to optimize the way we use the money. We have to say that there's going to be a more costly upfront intervention for some number of people so that we can realize on the back end a reduction of the overall cost, because for a person who's chronically unhoused, who has a serious mental illness, we're going to pay that cost every year until they die. They do not leave homelessness without real intervention. They are going to need that care every year. So that is a fixed cost in the way we deliver services. So why I was invited here today to just talk to you about this, and I understand there's a lot of people here who really care about this issue. And the way I describe this is there are ebbs and flows with how the public feels about homelessness. And you ride waves of what I call compassion, where the community comes to a place where it's like, we need to do something right for people, we need to help these people. And then it leads to a place where over time it becomes frustration, anger, irritation. And that's because we keep getting promised by elected officials in particular, we keep getting promised that we're gonna change something, that we're gonna do something differently, or this ballot measure will fund that thing that will solve this problem. And it doesn't actually get to that outcome. So people just get tired of saying, well, I keep giving them the authority to do what they say they need to do, and nothing changes. And so the question is like, well, what do we do, right? Like, what do we do? And there has to be an organized effort, whether that's between the faith communities, whether that's between people in local government and at the local government level. There has to be organization of people around, listen, we want to change the way we work. There's a great example, the Eastmont Mall. You all know where the Eastmont Mall is? Okay. So the Eastmont Mall to me is one of these great opportunities that has just been sitting in front of us that hasn't fully been realized. So when the mall had challenges, the county became a purchaser in leased a lot of the space at the mall. So Alameda Health Services there. It's providing a lot of these very direct services I'm talking about in a community where there's an overrepresentation of people who need that care, right? And they have complement of services there. The mall is actually the perfect location to create what we call a delivery hub. You take the old anchor tenant stores, these huge hundreds of thousands of square feet on the perimeter of the mall, and you turn them into shelters. And you move people indoors. And then back in the Midwest, that's what we did. In Ohio, there's one where they basically, the one department store became the men's shelter. The old department store became women and children's shelter. There was a smaller space in the building for people who had special health or mental health needs and couldn't be in general population settings. And then you turn all the spaces inside into all the offices and spaces where people need to just go get service. So it's not like, oh, hey, you have no car, no money, no ID, but you need to go across town to go see your mental health worker. And then in 2 weeks, you need to go, you don't even have a calendar. And you're supposed to figure out how to get all around and keep all these schedules. Nothing about that is going to work. Less than 20% of people who are in a house can keep those appointments. But you put the appointments where they stay, and they make all their appointments. They go. Because you literally know where they are. You just walk in, you're like, Rachel, we have an appointment at Social Security. And you're getting that care and you're getting that intervention. And then what they do in some of these locations where they've taken malls like this and changed them, they actually take the surface parking lot, those oceans of parking around it, and they actually build the affordable housing right around the project. And they just move the people as soon as they're stable in mental health care, they just move them into housing permanently. Well, hello, friend. Well, hello. Hi, baby. Looking for a handout. Oh, that's okay. What was the question?
I just was saying, I know that there are examples of this in Portland, my daughter's mentioned, but other places that have centralized
Yeah.
these kinds of things.
So one of the good things I should say, Alameda County is talking about creating what they're calling 3 service hubs, right? So they have been working towards these service hubs. And there is a North County service hub that they're talking about where there'd be this coordinated co-location of services, which is really key. You have to bring people inside, and then you have to put all the services around them, right, to make this efficacious. The best example of a community, in my opinion, that's done that, and I had the chance to go and visit, was Utah, Salt Lake City. Now, they have a couple things that are different, but speak to the faith community a little bit. So just hear me out and hear how this worked for them. So in Utah, they have far fewer counties than us and way less people. The whole state of Utah is only like 6 million people, right? So it's not even the size of the Bay Area population-wise. But they had a very significant homeless problem. They had 3 shelters in Salt Lake City. And they had a state director, he was the homelessness czar. He was fantastic. He passed away a couple years ago. But he invited a bunch of us who were regional leaders on homeless issues to come and see how they were doing services in Utah. And he said, so what we did, he goes, we had at the state, the governor said, if you want to get your transportation funding, county, you need to get on the plan with our homeless programs. And it's amazing how as soon as you have a stick and a carrot, people get their shit together. Sorry. They get their act together. Sorry. Well, I am sorry. So they get their act together. So they said, we're gonna change the way we do it. So they actually consolidated all 3 of their shelters into one. They did the first floor of the building. They put all 13 social and human service programs that people use, everything from the DMV to the VA to Social Security. Everything was housed. Every office had to have a person staffed full-time on the ground floor of the building. Second floor was the men's shelter. Third floor was the women's shelter. Fourth floor was special needs. And you'd come in for services, and they would do a single intake. So as opposed to applying to every agency for every benefit you could get, you did one uniform intake. I would take your intake. It would literally just get walked to every office for any benefit you were eligible for that you needed. You were signed up for everything in one day. And then you just moved upstairs. You could get mail there. There's all these things that people don't think about that are barriers for these folks. So they get mail. So then day 2, you meet your housing navigation specialist. And the whole project after that was, we're just gonna figure out what is the best place to put you in housing. How do we house you appropriately? Because there's different housing programs for different types of people. There's housing programs for veterans. There's housing programs for women with children, for domestic violence survivors. So there's a lot of different types of special housing programs, and we want to optimize it. Because if I just randomly give it to you, but you're a veteran, right? And if I've randomly given you, a general one, and the next person comes in that is not a veteran, and all I have left is a veteran unit, I didn't really optimize that really well, right? So they coordinate the entry to determine where everybody should go based on what would make them most appropriate, so that general spaces were left for people who may not have any special designations. And they reduced the amount of time it took people to get housed down to like 30 to 60 days. So then they take all the money that they save by doing it this way, and they use it to buy old motels and turn them into housing. So they get 30 or 60 units. They would just convert the motels into housing. They'd take 2 units on the motel. One would, the bedroom and bath would go away. It would become a kitchen in the back and a living room, and they would just remove the little door in the hallway in the middle, and boom, you'd have a unit. And so the way the church got involved is the Mormon church is really, really active, especially in Utah. But the church decided that was going to be its investment, and it partnered with the state. And it started making its annual contributions as a community church to a fund that helped the city and the county of Salt Lake buy properties faster to turn them, and they reduced their homeless population by over 80% in 6 years. Now, they didn't have the same amount of people we did, but that can be done, right? It can be done. And it didn't require waiting for cities to approve all kinds of new housing, spending $800,000 a unit to build an affordable housing building, waiting years to have the financing come out. Like, they're taking existing properties and repurposing them into spaces that allowed for independent living. There are solutions to doing these things, but we haven't organized ourselves in California around that. We just keep saying, well, the only solution is permanent housing. Permanent housing is the solution to homelessness. But when you have 10,000 people in Alameda County who are homeless, I don't know how quickly we think we're gonna build 10,000 units of housing. So we have to start somewhere, and that's a combination of serving people better than managing them in place, serving people in a way so that some people receive services in a way that they actually get better. They reconnect with family, things happen for them. And for some people, we move them into a place where we reduce the overall cost to the system, which allows us to then begin investing in those other solutions, and we give those people social and health outcomes in the meantime. So, now I've said like a lot, and I want to ask you, how would you like me to, would you like to call on people so that it's not like me picking, or how would you like to do it? We'll go around the room kind of thing? We'll just kind of go around the room. Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
Did you finish your Eastmont Mall discussion?
Yeah, so the Eastmont, yeah, thanks. So on the Eastmont Mall, what I would say is there's an opportunity there. There's almost 200,000 square feet of completely vacant space in a place where they already have these services.
They already do, so it sounds like somebody started it and then something stopped
The county just needed space to do some of these things already.
They've got a transportation hub.
Yep.
They've got social security,
Yeah.
they've got a library, they've got all the medical stuff.
Yep. Every behavioral health provider I talk to, when I talk to them about this is what we should do, they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Yes, we've been trying to find somebody who wants to do that. There's an absolute need to do it. There's an absolute need to do it. I can't tell you why the city and county haven't done it.
Okay, so my second question, and you may or may not have an answer. Who is responsible for county oversight? Who manages the county?
So we have 5 supervisors in the county, and the 5 supervisors are over that, and they hire the county administrator, and then there are a series of department heads, and there's a health department head, a human services department head, and a homeless services department head. In the county, 5 supervisors, just like you have a city council if you're in Oakland, they are the folks who decide on the budget for that, and they decide on the people who will set the policy for those agencies.
So in Alameda County, would you say they're not doing a good job? They answered my question.
Yeah. Oh, I'll repeat the question. Sorry for that. The question was, who's responsible for these in Alameda County? And there are 5 supervisors, and they're over as I answered. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your compassion. Second, I understand. Can you tell us about if you were running for a position with the county for an elected position and why?
I am. I was asked to the earlier question. She just asked if I was running for supervisor, and I am running for a supervisor seat, actually, yes. Yeah. So the county supervisors don't have term limits, which is terrible. And that's why we have been doing the same thing. So 3 of our county supervisors left in the last 2 years. 2 of them passed away, and 1 of them retired. They had all been there since, with the exception of 1, they'd all been there for about 20-some years. And the 2 that remain that have not left yet, one has been there for 32 years, and the other has been there for 24 years. And so they have this great amount of authority over how we do this. What's that? Over $4.2 billion of your budget every year. And we don't think about them much because they're not like your mayor and city council in the news every day, but they're the ones that make these decisions. And yes, our current county supervisor for our District 5, which is the northern part of the county, did announce he's retiring, and we did have a primary election. 9 people ran to fill it, and I was one of the top 2 finalists. So I will be on the ballot in November to try to replace him and bring somebody with a different perspective on this issue to the budget of this work. Yeah. And you have?
I want to ask why. What motivates you to run for this position?
I'm motivated to run for it because as somebody who's worked in this space for 25 years, it's deeply frustrating. I care a lot about people. It's deeply frustrating to know that there are, as we just kind of talked about, that there are interventions and solutions and ways to make this better. But there aren't people who have professional or lived experience making those decisions. It's like wanting to be the director of BART or the AC Transit Board, but you'd never ride the bus or subway. Like, why? Like, seriously. Like, yeah. but it's that kind of thing. Like, why would you want to decide the BART schedule if you don't ride BART? And it's kind of like, why are people wanting to run the county, but they have never used human services or worked in it? Like, but that's currently the composition of our board is like that. And so I'm running because, 1, I don't believe people should stay in public office forever. I don't believe in that as a philosophy. And so I've served 2 terms on the council, and I was going to leave anyway. But I had a lot of people encourage me and say, we need somebody who understands these issues doing it. So I'm running, yeah.
This is a follow-up on the election. I saw the primary stuff and the things that we received in the mail from California, official material. There were a number of people who said their biggest concern was housing, and you were among them. Thank goodness you made it. But it was a potluck for me to know which one of those was real.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to do research on every one of them to know what they mean by something.
And there's so many races.
Yes.
It's not even just our race. It's like you have 30 judges and you have no idea who any of them are.
But just in this race, that was still a problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the question was just like, how do you even learn who these people are and what they really stand for? I mean, this is the challenge. This is kind of getting a little bit off topic, but I'll just say it this way. This is the challenge with democracy this year. It's not started this year. It's been going on for a little bit, in my opinion. But we've come to a place culturally in society, in my opinion, where we're so individual, we forget community. And one of our community obligations is to pick people among us to make decisions for us so that we can keep doing the things we do every day, right? And I just really am concerned when you look at, I won't pick any particular election or get into politics, but when you look at a lot of the choices we have, I ask myself, this is the best choice we have? These are the best choices we have? Like, these are the people that we've decided? And I think it is eating away at the core of who we are as a community, because people feel like it's never gonna change. It's gonna be the same types of people. And so what it does is it leads to people paying less attention. And then it means then you get 9 people on your ballot, and you're like, I don't know who any of these people are. And it's partly because we are so busy doing things, and it's not anyone's fault, but we're so busy doing things that we don't pay attention to it to some degree. And the other part of it is, it's really just for the county supervisor. Like, when I went and knocked on people's doors, people were like, what does that job even do? Nobody even knows. We don't think about it. And so most of my time was spent trying just to tell people what we do. Yeah.
Just to follow up for a minute, I think what you've just done in the right way is throw it back at me. And that
It was a little love tap.
Yeah, it was a love tap. It was a love tap, but it really is. It's community stuff.
Yeah, it is community, I think. Yeah.
Well,
Oh.
Sarah has been
Yeah,
trying
Sarah,
to say
I'm
something.
sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say.
That's why I wanted, maybe you want to be my facilitator? Okay, you call on people so that people don't go, I had my hand raised.
I just wanted to say that we are part of an interfaith social justice organizing project called Genesis.
Mhm.
And we're planning on having a candidate forum for District
Oh,
5
good.
supervisor.
Great.
Yes, in the fall, so I want to get in touch with you.
Yep,
so
we can do that.
Satisfy the date. But that will be a chance, I don't know if we're going to do it here, we might do it in Corpus, is the idea. And so that would be a chance for a lot of people to come together in community, find out what happens in District 5 and who's running, so that we have a chance to vote our values.
There you go. That's perfect. Those are the best kinds of things. In fact, in the primary, Oakland Tech High School students had an event. A group of students, the debate team, brought all of us out, and like all of the Rockridge neighborhood came out to the high school. And we had like 100 people who came and they had flyered their neighborhood and said, you want to learn who these folks are? And so we took questions from all the students. It was really, and that to me, those are the most effective ways for people who want to learn about what we're doing to just get involved. I'll let you. Okay. Sylvia.
What you're saying makes tremendous sense. What has to happen to get us there from where we are?
Yeah. What has to get us there from where we are? So I would be lying to you if I said it would be like this, right? It won't. We just have to be realistic. It's going to take a few things. One is it's going to take boards of supervisors, for example. Don't get like one person doesn't make all the decisions. It takes a group of 3, right? So it's going to take cooperation. But right now there's nobody at these meetings. They start their meetings at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays and they go till 7 p.m. Who sits in those meetings? And they just have long presentations about healthcare and how we're providing services. Every Tuesday they have a different topic or whatever they go through. It's going to take somebody who's going to ask all the right questions, because right now no one asks, they don't question those programs. They're all interested in, well, what are we going to do on, the jail, or what certain other things that they run, the port. They're worried about naming the airport, there's other things that they do have authority over, but the vast majority of this stuff is supposed to be health and human services. So it's going to take someone who asks the right questions. It's going to take coalition. The idea that we have this idea of valorized leaders, like that you elect a person and they do the work. The community does the work. The community is the engine that makes stuff happen. Like when I was an advocate before I was elected, all the things that were accomplished were never my accomplishments. They were what we were able to do together. It was partnerships that got stuff done. It was multiple people coming. It was elected decision makers and other bureaucrats basically realizing everybody wants this. And if you have a certain critical mass, then there's a momentum to change. And it can change faster when more people are calling for it, but there needs to be a person in leadership that's visible, that's articulating what everybody wants.
And that the locus of this, policy shift would be on the Board of Supervisors?
The county is the responsible agency, yeah. Yeah, it has to partner still. Some of those features, like where you put a shelter, has to be done with the city of Oakland. The county can't build a shelter in a city. The city has to choose to do it. But there has to be someone who's willing to partner with those people and say, we should do this together.
Lori Gold. There are two things on my property tax bill that seem to have to do with homelessness.
Okay.
Dollars for housing.
Do you live in the city of Oakland?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've tried to call that number that's associated with it on the property tax bill to find out somehow, how are those dollars being spent? Because I would like to see some accountability in it. And it gets nowhere. So how would you advise that I try to find out how that money is being spent?
Yeah, so the question was that you have items on your tax bill that make it clear that it's for homeless services, and she's called the number and can't get a response from anybody, which that's how things are right now, it feels like. But how do you find accountability for what it's being spent on? So it depends on what it is, to be honest with you. So if it's a county measure, there are county measures. If it's a county measure, then it would be the county, and it would be the assessor's office. So there's a county assessor, that's Fong Law, and Fong Law's office is the agency that then collects the money for the county. And then there's going to be a corresponding department in the county that gets the money under the ballot measure and spends it, that the Board of Supervisors has put into place. If it's a City of Oakland measure, it's the city? Yeah. If it's the city one, then in theory, then the City of Oakland has directed that, or the ballot measure directs which department spends the money, and there's a department head who's responsible for that accountability.
Yeah, trying to figure that name. What do you call?
Ghostbusters. Yeah, so what I'd be happy to do is I'd be happy to send Nancy the links to like the places that you would call to get this information, and then she could share it with you if you'd like. Is that okay?
Justin, I'm sorry. That's all right.
Hi.
You are doing a number for how many people are in housing uncertainty. Does that include all the people who are living in their cars,
Yes.
in RVs, and couch surfing?
Yes.
And do those people have eligibility for housing? I mean, can I say, I'm living in the RV with my kids, we've been out here for 2 years. Are they on the same list with people who are sleeping in tents?
Yes. But it depends. Yes to eligibility, but in Alameda County, it requires you to apply first. So you're not just on it. And this is another space, is a really good question about housing eligibility for low-income housing and subsidized housing opportunities for people with minimum incomes. So one of the things that we are working on, the cities are working on with the county, Emeryville was one of the first to do this, is right now there are dozens of affordable housing buildings in the county, okay? There are two types of affordable housing. There's housing that's managed by the Public Housing Authority, right? So the Housing Authority of Alameda County, or the Oakland Housing Authority, or the Berkeley Housing Authority, and those are properties that are owned and or managed by the Housing Authority, and it operates under HUD law and federal law about how it provides those subsidies to people. Okay, then there are other projects that we call project-based housing, and those are low-income housing projects, but the property owner is either an affordable developer or some other type of developer, and they go through a tax credit process to generate finances that allow them to finance the project, and they get to select people within certain income ranges based on how they finance their property. In Alameda County, there are hundreds of those properties, okay? But if you want to apply to be on the wait list for one, you have to apply individually to every single one. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. You have to apply individually. So one of the things like we're doing in our city, because we have about a half dozen of them in our city. We're a small little 1 square mile city. We're actually working with the North County cities, and we're trying to create a uniform single application where there's a second page that just has all the properties and their addresses, and you can check all the boxes that you want it to apply to. Wouldn't that make a lot more sense?
Yes.
Yeah. But we make it really hard for poor people to come out of poverty. We make it really, really hard for people.
Aren't some communities like Stockton did the $500 just giving people
Guaranteed basic income.
There's several communities who now are doing
It's true. 45% of Americans could not afford more than a $500 emergency one time.
So we have this, millions of people going to fall into this category if we don't do something now.
Yeah, well, this is a bigger topic you're addressing, which is wealth inequality, right? Which is like there are literally 20 people in the United States who their collective income is greater than the other 330 million people in the United States. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have my burning question because Tom and I listened to the oral arguments in the Grants Pass case on homeless, and I pretty much convinced our U.S. Supreme Court will overrule the Ninth Circuit's position on this. That will give counties and cities license to clear homeless camps to enforce criminal laws against homeless people. And I wondered, first of all, so I feel like we just need some planning for that tsunami. That's going to come down over the summer. And my other really big question about that is, have you ever had experience with a humane way to move people out of, camps and so forth? So what the heck are we going to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, this comes back to the shelter point is, and that's kind of the Boise decision is the main decision, and Grants Pass was built on Boise, and the Supreme Court is looking to reverse all of those decisions. And for those who aren't familiar with the original decision in Boise, it basically said that a city can't arrest or move a person off of public property if they hadn't offered them several things first. They had to demonstrate that they had offered that person shelter, that they had shelter available, that services were available. It was a way of ensuring that we weren't just inhumanely moving people and we weren't offering them anything. That was the purpose of the original decision. What it's resulted in, and the argument for why Grants Pass got appealed, what it's resulted in is some communities and their police departments just say, we aren't gonna touch anything in a homeless camp because we'll just get sued if we move something and some person at a desk in the housing department hasn't offered them something they're supposed to offer them, right? So it just became, we're not gonna touch it. And so you've kind of got this it's not tenable either way. You can't not offer people services, but you also can't just say, well, we're gonna allow 80 tents to fill up the Little League baseball field and we're not gonna do anything about it, right? Like there's a balance to be had. But I personally think, have I ever dealt with that? Yes. The difference was I dealt with it most commonly in Illinois, and the difference was that we offered people shelter and they went to shelter, right? It's like your items will be moved here, but we're willing to we had lockers for them to put personal possessions in, we had things, and there isn't that system here. It's very, very, very small. It does not meet the needs of people who are here today. And because we don't provide good mental health services to people outdoors, it exacerbates the problem because it's really hard to get a person to understand what it is you're doing. We adopted something called an administrative instruction in Emeryville. So when I first got elected in Emeryville, there was a small encampment right on our city border with Oakland, and our then city manager wanted to have it all removed. It was just three tents with 4 people total in it. And I went in and I said, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And she's like, well, this, we need to move this stuff. But there's a lot of things that you have to be really careful of. People's personal documents are in there. And once they lose their personal documents, then they can't go get certain benefits and do things. There are horror stories of San Diego where they've scooped up people's stuff and they killed someone's dog in a tent in the process of doing it. Like and that's, they're really, really horrible. So it has to be a really humane process, but it's not humane if the only thing you're saying is you just can't be on this side of the street anymore. All they do is move to the other side of the street. And all we're gonna see happen now is there's gonna be this neighbor to neighbor war of people volleying people. I don't want them in front of my business, so the police come out, tell them to move, and now they're in front of your business until you call, right? And then what that does is that degrades the likelihood that people will trust government to get service, because all they'll see is government doesn't treat me like a human being. It's not a win-win. There's no win-win in it. I tell a story in Emeryville. I do a town hall every month in Emeryville, and I did one out on the peninsula. If you're familiar with the big project out on the peninsula, we have the Watergate complex. It's been there since the 70s. And I went out there to do a town hall once, and I had a lady stand up at the microphone, and she said, there's a homeless man under the Powell Street overpass, and he has 50 bags of trash. And she says, and I used to walk from Watergate to Trader Joe's to get my groceries, and I don't anymore because now I don't feel safe walking there. She said, what are you gonna do about that? So she sat down. I said, do you know what his name is? She's like, no. I go, does anyone know what his name is? Nobody's hands went up. And I was like, his name is Jim. And at that moment, I have conveyed to everybody, I'm the only person in this room who's actually made human contact with this person. And he is a person. And I said, Jim is 67 years old, and Jim had an apartment in West Oakland on 32nd at Peralta. And Jim paid his rent with his Social Security disability and about $300 to $400 a month that he made by recycling bottles and cans at the Peralta Street Recycling Center. They built a lot of new housing in that neighborhood, and residents in the new housing complained to the city government that they didn't like hearing shopping carts rattle with bottles and cans at 6 in the morning as people who were homeless were making their way to the recycling center to get some cash. So the city of Oakland closed the recycling center. And when they did that, they completely cut off his income, his supplemental income. 2 months of being behind on rent, this 67-year-old disabled man who had an apartment lost his apartment. He is now homeless. He spent a few weeks on the streets of West Oakland homeless, witnessed things that made him feel unsafe, gunfire, violence. He dragged all those bags. I said, they're not trash. Those are recyclables that he has continued to collect. He dragged them all to Emeryville under the Powell Street Bridge because he can sleep at night under the Powell Street Bridge in Emeryville. I said, he is not any threat to you. And I said, we visit him 4 days a week to provide him services. And I said, we have a van that comes now, and that van comes and it picks him up in several of his bags every week, and it takes him to Berkeley to their recycling center, and he can get cash, and he can use it on whatever he wants. We have offered him shelter. We've offered him the St. Vincent de Paul beds that we have. We've offered him those things, and he has said no. And I said, and in 2000, a woman knocked on my car window and offered me a place to stay. And I said no. I said, because there's something deeply humiliating about being a human being and knowing you need something very desperately that you cannot provide for yourself, but that someone else sees and can offer you like a Halloween candy. Something very humiliating about that. I said, so I'm not mad at him that he said no. He's just not in a place where he's ready to say yes. And I said, so you get somebody to yes by kindness. You get them with compassion, with a peanut butter sandwich. You do. Whether you're the person who offers that service or not, you get people with compassion. And so I was like, we have to keep doing that. And so I said, I don't have any condition other than we take him to get money off of the recyclables he picks up in Emeryville. I said, does anybody here have a problem with what I'm doing? No hands went up. I was like, great, when you go to the Trader Joe's, say good morning, Jim. So fast forward 2 to 3 months, go back to that location for a town hall. And I almost get murdered by a bunch of old ladies who come up to me, they're like, Jim is missing, Jim is missing. And I was like, they all know who he is now, right? So we start the meeting. I said, it sounds like you want to know an update on Jim. They go, yes, he accepted shelter services. And they were all so happy and relieved about that. And it's like, that's an individual story, and there are a lot of people, and they're at different places in their life and different reasons why they're there. But we don't give people kindness anymore. I'm saying it to the wrong people. On the whole, community does not give kindness anymore. And we need to lead with that, and we need to think about the people we serve as opposed to the bottom line of the budget or which city is going to approve the shelter or how we're going to. It's like those things can be solved, right? If our goal is still people. You have a comment?
I'm just going to thank you, John.
All right.